Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Flood Risk Awareness in Our New World. And really, today's webinar was created based on a lot of articles that both I've written and other articles that I've seen out there talking about how do we prepare for and how do we make sure that we are ourselves as individuals prepared if we not only have the COVID-19 natural and national disaster, but also have a flooding disaster at the same time. We've already seen this happen in parts of the country, such as the Michigan dam failures. We've already had three tropical events in our that have reached our shores here in the United States. So it's really important that we talk about a lot of this. I thought it was really interesting. We had some discussions the Costa Coalition did recently with FEMA, and they had mentioned that during the last hurricane, I think it was named Cristobal, that hit the New Orleans area, that many of the shelters were empty because people didn't want to go into large congregated areas. So this is really a very relevant topic and one that I hope you enjoy today, and that I hope that we can walk away from this with the understanding that we do need to not only keep the risk awareness alive, but prepare ourselves every single day for what could be two large disasters, both COVID-19 and flood. So let's begin. So a little bit about myself. My name is Joe Rossi, and I'll be presenting for you and with you today. And here's some of the different things that I'm involved in. And I really think the point of kind of showing you all the different areas that I'm involved in is to make sure you understand that my perspective on this is seeing both the community side, the understanding the challenges communities face, and also looking at the issues that you as individuals face and the insurance solutions, some of them that exist out there. So the Costa Coalition, who are we and what do we do? So the Massachusetts Costa Coalition was founded in 2012 as a stakeholder group. And during the 2012 and 2013, both the Bigger Waters Acts and the remapping, it really changed our mission and scope. We formalized a board of directors and really put together and formalized ourselves as a nonprofit over the years, expanding statewide, regionally, and nationally. And we're currently focused on insurance, real estate, and obviously how that all ties in community participation and how that all factors in to flood. So we've expanded our membership and services, and you can see on the right-hand side of the screen, I'm not going to go through them all, but that's our mission and goals. And really our mission is to educate, advocate, and inform, and we're hopefully going to be meeting our mission here today. And as a reminder, these webinars are Flood Risk Fridays. We're going to talk a little bit later about them. These are free half-hour webinars once a month to educate you on flooding issues that impact you and your world. So why is it so important to keep flood risk awareness alive? Well, let's take a look at your options during this time. So we currently have concurrent disasters as a real possibility here in America, right? We have the COVID-19 disaster, which on every level has stretched our state and federal partners to the limit. So right now, what we're looking at is a time when individuals as well, not only our state and local partners, but also you as individuals are stretched thin too. You have to, on a daily basis, decide, where am I going to feed my family, or am I going to pay my bills? These are realistic conversations that are happening across many more Americans than have ever happened before. So with our state and federal partners in they're running their capacity thin during this time, you become your best first responder. And so what does this mean? What this means is if there is a disaster, you need to prepare yourself. Every state now has a presidentially declared disaster. And I believe it was mentioned that this is the first time that this has ever happened. So every single state having their own individual disaster declarations. So here's a great quote from former FEMA Administrator Brock Long. We need to help individuals and families understand their personal roles in preparing for disasters and taking action. They are our true first responders. And that is so true. They are our first, you are your first true responder. When there's a huge disaster, FEMA and the states and all the other participating organizations, nonprofits, they will help, but you're going to be the best first responder. We're going to take a look at some of those reasons why. So going back April, a couple months ago, April is Financial Literacy Month and Financial Preparedness Month, right? So there is an official month for looking, really trying to take the time to look at your personal finances during this time. And it is a difficult time. As I mentioned before, do we provide for our families or do we pay our bills, keeping insurance, those types of things? But we don't have to make that the option. And we talk a lot at the Costa Coalition about insurance as a tool for financial resiliency and recovery, and that's because insurance in the short term to rebound from an event is your best tool. When there is a huge disaster and you're looking at a structure or your home, in many cases that is scattered all over the place, and you don't know how to pick the pieces back up, what's the first thing that's going to respond? It's going to be the insurance. They are going to be able to get you financial. The insurance policy is going to be able to get you those financial resources the quickest. We're actually going to take a look at that next. However, when we look at options, right, to keep that insurance in place during this time, there is such thing as private flood insurance. So private flood is flood insurance not from the National Flood Insurance Program, and it offers better coverages in some cases and a lower cost in some cases than the National Flood Insurance Program. So it's not a good fit for everyone, but it's an option, and it's an option that's now available. And there are some creative private flood products out there. For example, primary dollar options with large insurable values, right? So if you have these large property portfolios in the commercial world, there's a lot of new programs out there looking to insure those. Condo association layered programs. So there's programs out there for big condo buildings that need to have a lot of coverage that can actually now provide that coverage. Commercial and residential policies are being written in all flood zones through private carriers. Overall, summary here is flood insurance is a financial pain point that doesn't need to be eliminated. It can be eased for continued assurance. So if you're somebody that's in a situation right now during COVID-19 where you've lost your job and you're looking to strip different financial pieces out of your life, rather than getting rid of your flood insurance, start looking at the options available. And while it may not always be the case where you can find something that fits you the best, at least try to look before you go without flood insurance. Because again, we're talking about the possibility of two major disasters and the ability to recover on your own. So let's talk about resources that might go beyond insurance. Okay, so there's a huge flood disaster. How do we recover as a nation? Well, the first thing we would look to, many people look to, is disaster assistance, what we call individual assistance. But in Hurricane Harvey, the average individual assistance was only $6,000. So you really don't have a lot of individual assistance available. And in 53% of the cases, as we've found through an independent study here at the Costa Coalition, individual assistance isn't even given, and it's only given in general when there's a presidentially declared disaster. So what if you have a flood that affects 5 properties? Well, you're not going to get any individual assistance. So there does need to be, so individual assistance is very limited. What about the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program? Well, it's only limited funding after a storm event, and it can take up to 3 years to get that money and complete a project such as a home elevation. So the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program can be problematic. And what about the SBA? Well, I'm going ahead of myself. The Small Business Administration will offer loans up to $200,000 for primary homeowners. It's not always a good option either because it's a loan. So SBA still needs to be paid back. And we have a podcast coming out next week where we interviewed Dr. Carolyn Kuski, who says that in many cases, SBA loan applications can be denied because of bad credit. How about traditional lending products? Well, that's always available, right? But loan to value considerations must be taken into consideration, right? Because you need to still have some type of equity you can borrow against in the home. 203K programs, however, offer more flexibility, but still has lending restrictions. So what is left? And that is flood insurance. Now, in a hypothetical flood city, for example, you can have $500 million in insurable property or insurance available on insurable property in force of insurance that is guaranteed to be available at any time. And the example we use when we do our full 1-hour presentation on this is Flood City, which has 1,700 flood policies. Each one of them, if they're fully insured, gives coverage of somewhere in the range of $500 million in coverage that's available to those individuals within that community to recover after an event. And right now, that's really where the reliance is going to be, is on those flood insurance policies in order for you to recover after an event. So those are what we call the silos of resiliency, of financial resiliency. And there may be other resources, as we just looked at, but flood insurance really continues to be your best tool to financially recover. It's always available. And as we talked about a second ago, it can be inexpensive, and options are now available. Now, there's also the community rating system, which some communities are starting to participate in here in Massachusetts, and many do around the country. About 1,500 or so participate. And CRS actually does reduce premiums for National Flood Insurance Program policyholders. So you first should find out if your community participates. There's only about 22 to 25 communities in Massachusetts that do, many on the South Shore in Cape. And so basically, what is CRS? Well, it's a program where if a community does certain things, right? So the community does things, for example, such as public outreach and cleaning storm basins and doing other things like having a hazard mitigation plan and keeping track of their elevation certificates. Then to reduce the cost of flood insurance for the entire community's National Flood Insurance Program policyholders. You know, there's a strong correlation to policy affordability and policy participation. So those communities that are participating in CRS are going to most likely see the ability to get not only less expensive NFIP insurance, but make it a product that people now start to see as something that they can afford better if they can't get something cheaper in another market. So CRS is a critical element, one that the Coastal Coalition has been working diligently on over the last several years. So there are other risk reduction measures. So I like to say, and many people call me Joe Flood, and so here's a little quote from me. Just because we socially distance from each other, it does not mean that floods and other natural disasters will distance as well. And I mean, I think that's really important to realize that, you know, the flood doesn't follow the line on the map, and the flood doesn't stay away just because we're dealing with so many other things. These events are happening. I mean, like I mentioned, we already had 3 named storm events, and it's the soonest we've ever reached 3 named storm events in ever. So what else can you do, though, to reduce your overall risk? You understanding evacuation routes. Even if there's not an official evacuation route from your particular area, at least know how you would get out and where you would go. Having a personal emergency kit. This is really important. Have some stuff ready. Have that stuff ready in a place where you know where it is, all in one place that you can pick up and go if you have to. If you cannot get your individual location and property to a place where you feel safe in a storm. Get some stuff together in an emergency kit and take that with you somewhere. And knowing which disasters are most likely to strike. We always like to say where it rains, it floods, right? Where it rains, it can flood. And so we really are all susceptible to some type of flooding event. But if you're in an area that has not only flooding, but high wind concerns, earthquake concerns, wildfire concerns, right? Especially on the West Coast. These are the types of disasters you need to keep in mind and prepare the best for the natural disaster that you think is going to strike you, most likely to strike you. In reducing simple things that can reduce damage, can reduce a claim, and can reduce your reliance on needing to have some type of strong financial recovery tool, such as moving valuables out of a basement to prevent flood damage. I'll never forget seeing pictures of the flash flooding on the North Shore of Massachusetts several years ago, where all it took was a big rainstorm of about a couple hours with 6 or 7 inches of rain. People's basements flooded, washer and dryers floating there, right? So if you have, if you have items in those in vulnerable areas that are extremely important, get them out of there. Prevent that damage. Securing or bringing inside outdoor items that can turn into projectiles. This may not seem like a big deal, but when our streets turn into rivers in large events, and it can simply be a large rain event, what's going to happen to that grill? What's going to happen to that chair? Your deck? I've seen entire decks by water flow get picked up and pushed through foundation walls. So while we can't bring our decks inside, secure those items. Take items inside that you're not using and prevent them from being debris. Making sure our basement sump pumps work and directing drainage away from our homes. I mean, these very simple things. I'll tell you a personal story where I had done some drainage work around my own residence, and I am not in a high-risk flood zone, and I had underestimated the drainage capacity I needed. I had some mulch beds near the drains. The mulch washed into the drain, clogged them, and I had a flooded property. I had my front lawn had flooded, and while it didn't affect my building, my structure, my home, something as simple as trying to get those drainage ditches and that drainage around my property cleaned away for the next rainstorm, which we now haven't had in some time. But the point being is, make sure those simple things are done, because if they're not and we have a large event, you may be relying on having something in place such as flood insurance, which you should have anyways, to pay out and create a situation that becomes difficult during an additionally difficult time. Selective Flood actually put out this really interesting, really good. I like to use this and credit to Selective who put this together, Selective Insurance. It basically takes you through the step of what to do before, during, and after a storm. And I really like it because what it includes is things like make an inventory of valuables. So that's another thing you can do before an event happens. Today, we call it, the blue sky preparedness time, right? It's beautiful this week. Take some pictures. Take pictures of the inside of your house. Take pictures of the outside of the house. We talked about an emergency planning kit, and we talked about moving valuables to a safe place. Have a copy of your insurance policies and contact information on hand. This is for flood, this is for home, this is for auto, this is for all your insurance policies. And then during a storm, obviously there's some pretty straightforward things here. Turn off gas and electricity. If you can, remain in the upper portion of your home, find higher ground, or leave if you need to beforehand, and then stay where you are during the storm. And then after, return when it's safe. Obviously avoid down power lines, and then take those pictures again to make sure you're documenting the damage after. Pictures. I cannot emphasize that enough. In all of our community rating system material that we do, we talk a lot about making sure that you have pictures before and after. Document that damage. Not only can it help you, but in our coastal communities, it can help the communities themselves when trying to repair and replace coastal infrastructure. And the National Flood Insurance is helping during this time as well. In March, the National Flood Insurance Program announced that a flood policy with an expiration date between those dates, February 13th and June 15th, would have an extended grace period. So if you expired between those dates, you still get the grace period, but they did not extend the ability for policies beyond June 15th to get 120 days. So just know that that is now not happening anymore, but if you had a policy during that time that expired, you still have time to 120 days to pay your policy. Note that though, while the NFIP is extending payment options, lenders may be force placing insurance. Contact your insurance agent to find out more. In the National Flood Insurance Program is offering the policyholder the option of remote claims. We are seeing some people use this method. Basically, it allows the insurance company to use a remote system versus having somebody show up to your house after a claim. I think it's really innovative and forward thinking of the National Flood Insurance Program's part. So in summary, don't eliminate your flood insurance, reduce it, right? Reduce the cost, right? Don't reduce your coverage if you're properly insured. We don't want to see that, but we do want to say don't eliminate it, reduce your flood insurance cost. And there are options out there. So just keep, an open mind. There's options, don't eliminate it, and get some quotes, get some requotes, and get an idea of what you can do to reduce that cost. There's things that you can do to reduce your chance of a claim or a bigger disaster, right? We talked about removing and strapping down outdoor items, bringing them in, bringing your valuables to higher ground. Financial resources may be there after a flood, but insurance remains your best choice. So just remember, if you're relying on somebody else to help you, that's probably not a good choice. The NFIP is also helping, and you are the best prevention and protection from a second disaster. Make sure that you're always prepared yourself. I cannot emphasize that enough. So that concludes our webinar. We're now going to talk just very quickly about what's coming up next. So in July, with a date to be determined, we are doing our next webinar, our Flood Risk Friday. These are called Flood Risk Friday webinars. And as our nation experiences more floods, so does the demand for flood insurance. And so our next webinar is going to focus on the marketplace, right? We talked a lot about private flood insurance today. We're going to be actually examining it in detail in our next webinar. We have a special guest presenter. We're not going to announce yet. We're still finalizing the details. And that is also why July's date is to be determined at this point. But we will be talking about flood insurance options in the marketplace. We'll be looking at private flood insurance. We'll be talking all about it, how it compares to the National Flood Insurance Program. I really am excited. This is going to be a great opportunity for people to really learn very succinctly and very simply about how private flood insurance works in the marketplace and options that are out there. Great. I appreciate everybody participating today. We're ending a little earlier than 10:30, but that's great. Give you 5 minutes back of your day. Here's how you can contact the Costa Coalition. And remember, if you're not a member, become a member and get all the benefits that we offer. This is a sampling once a month, a half-hour free webinar. We do have CE courses that we offer for realtors and insurance agents. So go on, find out more, and know flood. So thank you all for participating today. We had a lot of participants, so thank you very much, and we will talk soon in July at our next webinar.